Good morning and welcome. The meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure is hereby reconvened at this public hearing. Of course, this hearing is taking place pursuant to the committee's inquiry into the allocation and utilization of state lands for food production. I wish to remind members and officials present to either turn off your cell phones or place same on silent and or vibrate. It should be noted that this hearing is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel ParlView. Members of the viewing and listening audience are reminded that they can send comments via email at parl101@parliament.org or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/ttparliament or on Twitter at ttparliament. I want to take this opportunity to welcome the Permanent Secretary and accompanying officials of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, and invite them now to introduce themselves.
I'm Angela Sue, the Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Good morning, Chair and members. Claudel McKellar, Deputy Permanent Secretary.
Good morning, everyone. Alison Berkeley's Director, Human Resource.
Good morning. I'm Paula Drakes, Commissioner of State Lands.
Good morning to everyone. I am Jacqueline Gantoum Farrell and Coordinator of the Agriculture Land Administration Unit of the Ministry.
Good morning, Chair and members. I am Natasha Hossein, the Director Legal Services in the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Chair, we have one more person.
Hi, good morning. I'm Anne-Marie Dardane, Director, Engineering Division, Ministry of Agriculture, London.
Nasser Abdul, Director, Lands and Surveys.
Senator and Chair of this committee, Stephen Crease. I would like, of course, to introduce members of my committee.
Good morning. I'm Rushton Parry, MP for Mayaro.
Good morning, Nigel Ifritas, member.
Good morning, Glenda Jennings-Smith, member.
Good morning, Lovell Francis, member.
Okay, I'd like to take this opportunity, of course, to remind all that of the inquiry objectives to attain insights into the allocation and utilization of state lands in Trinidad and Tobago, to gain a full understanding of the policies and procedures regarding state land allocation and development, particularly with respect to lands for agricultural utilization, to examine the level of development of agricultural state lands for food production, to assess the suitability of land tenure arrangements for food production, to understand the key challenges in providing adequate state lands for food production, to understand the relationship between the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries and other stakeholders relevant to agricultural state lands. I wish to take this opportunity, of course, to acknowledge receipt of the submissions from the Ministry dated October 25th in response to the committee's request for written responses. I want to now ask the Permanent Secretary to make some brief opening remarks, and I would like, within the context of those remarks, some indication as to what steps are being taken to utilize and develop the human resource potential available for the purposes of food production, as well as to indicate to us some of the new initiatives that are being undertaken that hopefully would improve production, bearing in mind the minister's stated policy of the reduction of our food import bill by, of course, boosting food production locally. So over to you, Madam PS.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee, and a Happy New Year to you all. I'm mindful of the very important mandate of this committee and your quest to have a better understanding of the utilization and allocation of the state lands of food production as it stands today. I'm advised that the committee met sometime last year, I believe it was in May, with regard to land tenure issues. When I joined the ministry in the middle of last year, I recognized that there were a lot of issues and challenges being experienced by the ministry as it relates to the issues at hand. As submitted in our written responses, one of our key critical challenges has been the lack of a comprehensive information management system, databases, etc., as it pertains to the utilization and allocation of land for food production. In this regard, we have been allocated $6.9 million to upgrade our IT infrastructure and also to improve on what we have as our information system in the ministry. We've also had allocation for land management, the development of a land management system, as well as an electronic document management system. And we are also seeking to re-establish SALIS, which is a state agricultural land information system. To this end, we have engaged a director, ICT, to move these systems forward. And at present, he came in sometime in October. At present, he is making an assessment of what the needs are, what we would like to see based on the policy, our policy that we are creating, and also our new national agricultural sector development plan, which would encompass how we go about land distribution, irrigation measures, training of personnel in the farming community, etc. That apart, the national land policy, which we are preparing and we hope to finish within this quarter, it seeks to address the challenges that we are encountering with agriculture lands. And really it is to encourage the expansion and a greater production in the agricultural sector. And some of the achievements we are hoping to get from it is really the preservation and conservation of prime agricultural lands for agricultural use, reduction of underutilization of large parcels, because we recognize that some of the parcels are not utilized as we would like to see to encourage greater production, food production in the country. We want to promote and facilitate a greater access to land and broad-based ownership of land, strengthen partnerships between public and private sector stakeholders. We recognize that we may not be able to do it all on our own, and we are seeking to engage private stakeholders, private-public partnerships. also to minimize the degradation of land and to enhance the knowledge and skills for optimization, optimum utilization of the lands. That is among the farmers and other stakeholders. Of course, with all of that, we would have to update the existing legislation to ensure that, we have an improved and efficient system. And these are just a few of the strategies we are trying to engage in and sanctioned by a national land policy. As such, we welcome this meeting. We are always open to suggestions, and out of the questions you may give today, it may lead us, to other things that we know we may need to look at. Right? So we welcome this meeting as we do our part to establish an effective and efficient system for the utilization and allocation of state lands for food production. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam PS. Dr. Love.
Good morning, Madam PS. Good morning to all the members representing the Ministry of Agriculture. I am asking this question to get some foundational knowledge, and I'm pretty sure we asked it last year in May when we met. But just give us a basis for further discussion. At this point, does the ministry have a reliable sense of how much state lands under its control, where they are located, and their current status? I'm asking that, noting, of course, what you described in or explained in your opening statement.
Reliable to an extent. Generally, we have an idea of where farmers are within the country, right? The status of every parcel or plot, no, we don't have that. As a matter of fact, we're working on that now, right? The location, yes, we generally have an idea, right? And you asked again, what is produced?
Status.
Status.
Meaning what, simplify, what is being used for at the moment or not being used at all?
Well,
do you have a sense of that?
We have a sense, yes, but to a certain extent. Not where we would want it to be, right? Because we would have our officers going out to assist farmers who need our assistance and so on.
I'm not talking, I haven't zeroed into agriculture, state lands allocated for agriculture yet. I'm talking in general, state lands. Does the ministry have a sense?
We don't have concrete figures.
Yeah.
Right?
So if I were to ask how much land comes under your direct purview, could we get a response? Is it possible to respond to that?
Commissioner, can you answer that?
The figures I have before me as of November 30th, 2016, in terms of the number of parcels we have actually recorded from, of course, from various sources, whether it's survey plans or out in the field. So it's a combination of field plus records. We have 64,082. That's 64082. And a total of, in terms of hectarage, 151,339 hectares.
Okay. Could I ask how much of that has been allocated specifically for agriculture?
And that is what PS is referring to now. While I give you the number of parcels, unfortunately, within the ministry, the record in terms of agricultural lands were kept as number of blocks.
Okay.
And so
it's a different measure.
Right. So that's what we're trying to sort out now. So I can tell you how many blocks, but I don't know how many parcels. Exactly. We are counting them now.
Okay. So that's in, That is ongoing,
Yes, that's ongoing.
and you're satisfied with the process and progress so far?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. How does the ministry decide that lands are to be allocated for agriculture? Is it based on a measurement of the productivity of the land, potential productivity? Is it based on tradition? Is it based on location? What methodology is used to decide that Block A or Plot A is to be used for agriculture?
If I may, through you, Chair, agricultural lands are designated by the Town and Country Planning Division in general, but within the ministry, there is a technical assessment will be made as to what is the best agricultural use for the parcel, depending on the soil type, the topography, the drainage, and so on. The ministry makes an assessment that these areas are better for food crops or fine vegetable crops if it's depending on the slope and so on. We would look at the possibility of the erosion and things like that. But generally, Town and Country says where lands are designated for agriculture, and within those lands, we would make the final assessments of what sort of agriculture is best used for.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll come back.
Can I? Yeah, just out of curiosity, good morning again. The data that you're giving in regards to the hectarage and whatnot, exactly how is that data presented at the ministry? Do you all have GIS maps, or do you all have a map overlay of exactly all of the state lands that are available in Trinidad?
Yes, the data has come from, again, the perusal of survey plans and also from work in the field. And we do use a combination of mobile GPS mapping, as well as, like I say, digitizing the survey plan. So we do have a geographic information system in general that is capturing, among other things, it's capturing the parcels. And we do provide them as maps, yes.
Yeah, and the reason I was asking that is because in terms of land use for agriculture specifically, excuse me, and whether the parcels of land are actually being used for agriculture, I was wondering how do you guys go about finding out whether the land is being used for what it said is being used? Is that a field worker goes out and looks at the land? All right. And the reason I'm asking that question is because I'm wondering if in this day and age, if there wasn't a more simpler method, for example, use of drones to take a overlay from above, which might be simpler, and you get a much wider field to determine whether the land is being used for agriculture. Because if it is, yeah, you're going to obviously see the land being dug up and whatnot, and planting being going on. And to me, it seems in conjunction with the GIS mapping and everything, it's a faster way of collecting data and giving you guys information to be able to, distribute the land or come to a decision in regards to land use. Is that something that is being looked at all?
Okay, let me ask the Director of Surveys to answer that.
2 years ago, the then Ministry of Land and Marine started negotiations to purchase a drone. The drone was sourced. It's not a normal drone you would find at PriceSmart. It's a drone as large as a pickup tree that could do the work that you were asking about. But the problem they had with the drone, it crashed actually on its first test run. Because they said the quality of the diesel we have in Trinidad wasn't of high enough for that sort of equipment. So right now we're trying to source another drone that could use the fuel that we have in Trinidad for its for flying.
Okay, so did it crash because of
They said the
fuel, it ran out of fuel, or the fuel
no, the fuel quality in Trinidad wasn't good enough, wasn't high enough for that kind of equipment. It was a Swiss-made drone.
Okay. Yeah.
The obvious answer arises, wouldn't someone have checked this beforehand or during? I'm sure that drone didn't come for free.
Well, they actually took back the drone and they reimbursed us.
Oh, we got our money back?
What?
We got our money back?
Yes, we did.
Okay, well, I'm satisfied now.
Just for clarity, when you responded a while ago on the question of, the quantum of land available or designated for agricultural purposes, I wondered whether, within the state sector, I wondered whether this included the lands that fall under EMBD and whether it included the lands over which Petrotrin, the oil company, has some leasehold or some kind of arrangement with the state.
If I may, at Lands and Surveys, we have maps of all the state lands in Trinidad, including those that is leased or, leased to Petrotrin, or even if Petrotrin has the petroleum rights over the land. So you have a list of all the state lands in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
No, I'm not sure if I'm preempting, but I'm thinking that the question is really, that figure we had, that 64,000 parcels, did that include, for example, the lands that would have been former colony lands?
Yes, it does. It would have specifically included the lands that would have been, for example, from Caroni that were given out under the VSEP program, both residential and agricultural. What it probably is not showing just yet, remember, let's say Caroni, and Caroni sort of changed the dynamics of state land when those lands became state land. So the overall Caroni acreage, we would not have a single figure. We would have that overall Caroni acreage broken up into Caroni tenants, Caroni VSEP, Caroni squatters whom they recognize. So we will have it broken up into those parcel numbers.
I probably should have asked you before, what is a parcel? Because I know acres and hectares. Those are measures that I can really, what does the ministry mean when it says parcel of land?
In strictly survey speak, and director surveys will support that, I think, we don't speak of lots or plots, we say parcel. A parcel could be any size.
So it's not a fixed figure, it's an arbitrary figure.
Neither is a lot. Most trainees will tell you a lot is 5,000 square feet. Doesn't have to be. We just say parcel. It's a generic term.
Okay, all right.
Good morning again. I just want to go back to the opening conversation, Madam PS, concerning the IT component of our preparation to move forward in 2017. And having an IT background myself, I clearly understand the need to make decisions, and with the access to information makes the decision-making process all the more easier. In the 2016-2017 budget, a fair amount of money was allocated to the Ministry of Agriculture for IT equipment acquisition software. In May last year, when you came before this committee, that was a matter that got a very high attention in terms of the lack of, and I was glad to see money moved to those areas. We have 12 months in this year. You have a new IT director, which I assume is a person of very high competency in terms of getting this job done. Can you give, or are you willing to give this committee any assurances that within the next 12 months, we will see some implementation of these tools and some action being taken in terms of how do we move the data from just being data to intelligence to make some good decisions in the ministry to move forward?
Actually, our intention is to have an integrated system so that the concentration would not only be on lands, but would be on all the information that the ministry has. Land is the top priority now because, as you see from the written submissions, the status of what is happening. Our intention is to reintroduce something we call SALIS, State Agriculture and Land Information System, which we had before, I am advised, and which was stopped in 2011. So we're seeking to reintroduce that, and so that will give us an idea of where the lands are, who has it, identify whether it's legally or illegally occupied, that kind of information, what it's been used for. We also seeking, and we have started on a very small scale, to computerize the information. As a matter of fact, the Commissioner has indicated that the information that we have in our vaults, we have assigned persons to computerize that while we wait to purchase our equipment and so on. Our director, ICT, has only just come on, just in October. And you would imagine, given the size of our ministry, he has had to liaise with the different heads of the different divisions. We have about 12 divisions, 3 units, to get from them what the needs are and to make the recommendations, and so to start with the procurement process.
Any time frames that you can give us in terms of how fast that this activity would happen, and are you adequately resourced in terms of the support that is required to convert this bulk of paper into electronic information? Is the ministry adequately resourced for that at this time?
At this time, no, we are not adequately resourced, but we have been pursuing in the last quarter to get some people on board. Actually, we have had interviews for different positions, and we have to do it on a phased basis, given the funding that we have been allocated. So far, we have roughly about 31 positions to come on board, and that is for the land management division only. So that we expect, I would say by the end of February, we should have those people on board, right, with regard to resources. The time frames, this SALIS, we are expecting by the end of this quarter, that particular one. While we are trying to get that on board, we continue with our computerization, right? Well, that is ongoing. That would be ongoing. Cadastral management system, which we want to synchronize with the information systems in the land management division that we want to introduce. From what Director of Services was saying is that we are trying to get some people on board by the end of January, right? Latest end of February to get that going. The cadastral management system is ready, information system is ready for us to be able to identify our cadastral maps and so on, which will also assist us in our information land information system. So that is the short term. The long term, I would think, for the entire IT upgrade and infrastructure and so on, I think will come on stream sometime in next year, probably the middle of next year. It is going to take a while.
Yes, Chair. I want to ask, I see you have done a study and you have developed a paper on procedures to regularize the occupation of farmers on state agricultural lands, with the exception of Caroni. Could you tell me how far you all have reached with this process? And what areas, I want you, when you're answering, I want you to distinguish to me areas, like you are going to look at St. David, St. Andrew, St. Patrick, I want it to be categorized in those areas, so we get a sense of what's happening in what region. Tobago, all these regions separate.
Regularize. Commissioner, you can answer.
First off, let me say Commissioner State Lands has no jurisdiction in Tobago except for 2 parcels that belong to the President and Prime Minister's house. Other than that, my jurisdiction starts from the seashore, seaward. Tobago House of Assembly will best answer the questions on their state land and what they're doing. So I can only speak for Trinidad at this point in time. Outside of Carney lands, the regularization process specifically for farmers, you're looking, right, at agricultural lands, within the various counties.
I want to state specifically farmers who are now farmers occupying state lands.
The process to regularize has been, and we're about to look at updating it, but the process would normally start again within the county. We have county offices. The field officers in the county would go out, do an occupational survey, how much land, what percentage of the parcel is under cultivation, what is being cultivated or reared in terms of livestock, the name of the farmer, whether the person applied for a farmer's badge. So all of that comes back as a report to the various county offices with a recommendation from the field officer as to whether this person should be regularized in situ or on another plot. Especially if that person is practicing, for example, livestock farming, that we won't want too close to either human habitation or interspersed with crop production. So the recommendation always starts from in the field and makes its way to the county office. The officers there again would further make recommendations, especially as to what other parcels might be available if someone has to be relocated. And eventually it makes its way to the Commissioner of State Lands with a concrete recommendation that these people ought to be regularized, in which locations, for how much land, etc. Commissioner will then, if Commissioner is in agreement, would then send that forward to Cabinet for approval.
Having outlined the procedure, can you tell us in what areas, how many you have done so far for the last fiscal year?
Again, remember, agricultural lands are by blocks. So within the southern counties, I'll start first. I have before me at this point in time from St. Patrick, 3 or 4 blocks to be regularized. From St. Andrew, St. David, I don't have very many blocks of land, but I do have blocks within the Carney County. I don't have the figures right in front of me, but Carney County would be about another 4 or 5 blocks to be regularized. Now, within this block, it can be 20 parcels, 50 parcels, sometimes 10 parcels. It doesn't mean all of the parcels there are occupied. Some actually, let's say a block of 10 parcels. We may actually have some farmers on 2 parcels who have all their tenure documents and they're proceeding. So within a block, I may only have a few parcels to regularize. But I've so far got 3 or 4 blocks from Carney, none from St. Andrew, St. David, as far as I know. Within St. George, East and West, I think I have about another 4 blocks. And as I say, in St. Patrick, it's about another 3 or 4 blocks that I'm working on now.
Commissioner, can you tell me, or give me an idea in 2015, how many, I know last May when we met, we had asked about the current amount of leases that were pending in terms of sitting somewhere to be granted to our farmers. And it was in the vicinity, I think, I stand to be corrected, somewhere around 6,000, if I could recall. And then the conversation with the farmers, they say it's more like about 20,000. So there's a huge gap in what the farmers think and what there maybe actually is. But can you give us an indication of how many lease applications are or were granted in 2015 and how much is currently before you for this year? And if there is any plan to do anything to expedite or speed up that process this year for our farmers?
In terms of lease applications, I would not have figures for 2015. What I do know is that the Chief State Solicitor, who actually prepares the leases, from their records in which we've concurred that our figures are similar, non-Carney lands, Carney 1975 Limited, there are 400 leases at the Chief State Solicitor awaiting execution. There may be just one or two points of clarity that they're waiting on. Sometimes it's simply an updated inspection report on the parcel before we execute. Sometimes it's a document. With agricultural lands especially, a program of development is normally attached to the deed, which the lessee would sign. And in most cases, it's the program of development that is missing. That has to come from the county office. And so those are holding back the execution of the leases. So we have, like I said, about 400 in train now, and we are actively working with the county offices now to get those programs of development to the Chief State Solicitor so we can proceed.
Is there anything that your department can do to expedite? And I ask this in the context that in May when we met, and again, I stand to be corrected, I think Mrs. Farrell was here, and she told us of an IDB project or program that was done a few years ago, where there was an umbrella unit where all the different agencies came together, and they were able to process about 1,500 leases in about 6 months. And I think the question at that time was, why did it stop? You know, if that system worked well for 6 months, why didn't we continue with it? So I think the question really needs to ask, you know, are you aware of that particular program that was done under an IDB project? And if there is an opportunity to re-implement something similar this year in 2017, taking note of the urgent requirement of our farmers to get those leases, to push their mechanizations, their capitalizations, their funding, to get their farms going. Is that something that you are aware of or you are willing to look at and take some consideration into going forward?
Chair, I would ask Ms. Gantum Farrell to answer that question. Through you.
Thank you. So, Chair, what I had said the last time was that there was an accelerated land distribution program, but we did not actually execute the leases. What I said was that we had prepared and gotten approval for those approximately 1,500. It was over an 18-month period, actually. Because the lease and regularization process is somewhat long, and there are many steps in it. And that unit, at the time, we had to get a separate valuation and a whole set of discrete things. What has been done so far is that the rents have been standardized, so we don't have to go to valuation for each parcel. Coming back to what Dr. Francis asked, what is a parcel? A parcel could be any size, and therefore, when previously when we had to determine the rent, the commissioner had to determine, he had to get a valuation for the parcel, just like if you're buying a house lot or whatever. Now, Cabinet has standardized the rent. It's $400 an acre for livestock and $200 for different types of agriculture. So we don't have to get a valuation of each parcel. So that has taken a big chunk out of the time delay. What we are doing, and this is what myself and another coordinator, what we are working with the commissioner and the IT director is to see how we can not only re-engineer the process so that it isn't as long and as convoluted, but also to automate aspects of it so that would address the efficiency questions you asked, to speed up the delivery of leases. Having done all of that, we still have to get approval of Cabinet, and then we have to send it to the Chief State Solicitor. And that is a process that is largely out of our hands, because when it gets to the chief state solicitor, then they take it on board. So my role, as long as together with another coordinator, two other coordinators, to actually look at how we could re-engineer the entirety of the process. Taking on board that Cabinet has already removed the delay caused by having to go for valuation of each and every parcel. But we are working on cutting out some of the steps or making them so efficient that they don't take the length of time that they currently do.
So we can expect to see a bump up in the delivery of these leases in 2017?
Yes, sir. I believe the commissioner already has, even without the entirety of the process re-engineering, I think this commissioner has some leases that she's about to have executed, or she has executed and will be delivering in a very short period of time. She has given some projections of what we can expect within the first quarter, Commissioner.
Are you willing to share those projections?
The first set of leases will be distributed in the next 2 weeks, and we have so far about 100, and I'm looking possibly for another 200 or so by the end of this quarter.
Okay, that's good. Ms. Drakes, the last time this committee met with your office, we were informed of a litany of human resource issues, manpower issues in terms of your office. You seem to be producing or about to produce. Have those problems been rectified, or are you working despite? Have any steps been made to look at the staffing issues that troubled the Commissioner of State Lands office?
The staffing issues are still dire, and I really mean dire.
No, we got that sense last year. That's why I'm asking again.
Really dire. But, and yes, I really, at this point in time, today, I have no staff working on agricultural matters. I just don't have the staff. If I have to pull anybody else from another portfolio, just now I'm looking at my cleaners. I'm going to find out who has a degree and I can teach, because I'm in teaching mode. My OJTs have gone, all the technical staff have gone, and all I have are administrative and maintenance staff with me.
Okay.
And it's really, really hard, but I'm persevering nevertheless.
Right, so I'll hit you. I'll bowl you a low full toss. How are you surviving? And then I'll bowl you a bouncer. What moves are being made to rectify that problem?
All right, so let me answer. As I said earlier on, we've done interviews and so on, and we have 31 positions on standby, which we would be, which would be taking up the positions at the Land Management Division between now and the end of February. In addition to that, we have before PMCD approximately 31 or 36 positions, which we are hoping that Cabinet would agree to, for us to beef up that.
So the cleaners might be spared.
Well,
and when we come back next year, we will not be saying that the Commissioner of State Lands is still bereft of our staff.
Actually, we have approval for some of those positions. It's just a matter of getting them to come in. But as you would imagine, people have to give adequate notice of the jobs that they're in before they could come on board. Okay. And that is where we're at.
Okay. Madam Permanent Secretary, at one point we were once again, for the 1 millionth time, trying to increase local food production, and we stumbled upon a mega farm idea. What became of that idea, and what became of the extant mega farms themselves? Has the ministry abandoned the idea? What are the farms in existence? What has happened? Or has the whole thing gone into abeyance?
We haven't abandoned the idea. We have had some funding challenges, and as you know, given that we have now come back together as agriculture, land, fisheries, forestry. There has been some struggle in terms of getting our act together, so to speak, and we are engaged in different projects, smaller projects, that is, in the different areas to keep the ministry afloat. So this mega farm has not gone out of the window, but we have just rested it down for a little while.
So it's something you plan to revisit in the not too distant future?
We plan to revisit, but as I say, we want to do things in a scientific manner, so that we would, have an efficient, effective, process one, and we want to ensure that when we have this farm, that we are producing what is really needed for the local our local citizens.
Madam Pumsek, you've said the magic word, and the magic word is science. Now, before we came down to this public meeting, as a committee, we were discussing, from our perspective, a number of the issues that dog and hold back agriculture in this country. Now, full disclosure, I wrote my PhD on Caroni, so I know far too much about that particular case of agricultural underproductivity, and generally about the things that hamper agricultural output in this country. Now, in the 80s, we had a $1 billion food import bill, and we started wringing our hands and talking about diversification, trying to increase food output. So we've been through this before.
Yes.
Now it's a $4 billion food import bill, and we're discussing the same thing, and we're wringing hands again, and nothing seems to come to fruition. I have a major concern as a person from a rural constituency that is very much agriculturally centered. Why is it? And much of this is on state lands or lands allocated, controlled by the state. Why is it, after 50 years, I am still seeing farmers plowing land downhill instead of contour plowing? Why is it that our agriculture still seems to be bogged down in 19th century methods? I'm not even saying 20th century, because we haven't reached the 20th century yet. Why is our agricultural production still peasant farming in the 21st century? Why isn't it that we haven't taken that leap to understand that agriculture is not just a guy in a tall boots and a machete? It's really about higher yielding crops. It's really about using the soils in the best way that you can, because our soils are latosols. They are naturally unproductive, but they are mixed methods of farming that you can use to increase productivity per acre, increase your yield. Why is it that we have not been able to harness the potential of our agriculture? When the ministry is involved in agricultural training, and UE is involved, and UTT is involved, blah, 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 blah. And we still are stuck in a paradigm that belongs 200 years ago. I don't understand it. Is it that in this country, culture trumps education? Is it that because we've been just oil and gas based, we haven't really cared, and we only care when we are in a depressed economic period? Are we going to make the real effort this time, or are we just going to wait till oil and gas comes back and then we could buy food? What are we fundamentally doing to ensure that the low production, it's abysmally low, it's been for decades, and the low productivity of the agricultural sector are going to change in any meaningful, measurable way?
Okay. It's a 50-year-old, very hard question.
It's 200 years. I've just been polite by saying 50 years.
Okay. From the little time that I've been at the ministry, what I've noted is that we have an aging population of farmers. An aging population of farmers who are unwilling to learn the new methods, new technology, and so on. Apart from that, we also have a youth population that really and truly isn't, to the great extent that we want, interested in agriculture. And we've had discussions in the ministry where we want to make it appealing to them. And the only way we can do that is by, probably introducing new technologies and so on into it. As you know, introduction of new technologies takes a lot of funding. We've also bandied the idea of asking international agencies for assistance in that regard, particularly to get the youth in agriculture. That apart, what I have surmised from the information that I have is that over the years, different administrations have had different policies with regard to agriculture. Sometimes, in some instances, it would not have been that agriculture was on the front burner, and that might answer part of your 50-year-old question. That apart, with regard to the executive of the ministries, you find you have a regular change of leadership. I just joined a few months ago. We had somebody before that, and then we had somebody before that. Apart from that, you always have the ministry splintered. Land was on its own, agriculture was on its own, and then you have them coming back together, and then they have to reintegrate and all of that. And all of these things that appear to be simple, I mean, it really complicates the entire matter. So I'm saying we have a minister who is willing and who has been out in the field from day one, trying and encouraging us. He has been trying, to get that agriculture on the front burner. And I think we have the spirit to move it on, so that we are hoping and we are insisting that our agriculture be on the front burner, right? It is not going to be an easy task, right? We've been trying to put things in place, education of the farming population through our programs, the introduction of IT, so that information systems, so that we could, make informed decisions based on the information that we're getting out of it, right? And those are two of the strategies we have already done the National Agricultural Sector Plan, which identifies all the challenges, and we've come up with ways in which we would be able to deal with them. That is going to consultation within the next month, right, where we're going to meet with stakeholders and for them to, to give us an idea so that we could finalize that to go to cabinet. The land policy we're working on as well to ensure that there's, proper distribution, etc. Right? So these are some of the things that we are trying, right? And we are hopeful that we have the support of the political directorate. We also have the support of the ministry staff in moving it forward and to make a difference to what it was in the past.
Madam Permsec, one of the problems we've had as a culture, I wouldn't say a nation because it's a Caribbean paradigm, is that we were engineered to produce crops for export. We were never engineered to produce food for local consumption.
Yeah.
So we have a historical problem, a traditional problem. What are you doing to get us beyond that, beyond hope and beyond the politicians? Now, we can argue about whether we need more people involved in farming, and there's no correct answer to that. Because when you look at nations that are able to feed themselves, we can't feed 1.3 million. When you look at nations that are able to feed themselves, the population or the percentage of the workforce involved in agriculture is still small. You go to Canada, you go to Russia, you go to America, you go to China, you go to India. Their population, their agricultural population, compared to the number of people, is still a very small percentage. So we might not be doing that badly in terms of that. What they are productive. And we aren't productive. What are you doing to help to increase the productivity and then thereby increase the production of our farmers? Do we know which farmers in Trinidad are doing the innovative things that are increasing yield, that are increasing productivity, that are increasing profit? Do we know who they are? Now, I ask this in my ministry all the time. Do we know, Mr. Mikala, you know that, because you've had me before. Do we know who the brilliant teachers are and what are they doing? I'm asking you the same question in your ministry. Do we know who our creative and productive farmers are? What they're doing? What results are they getting? Can we highlight them? Can we borrow from them? Because sometimes the innovation doesn't have to come from us. It can come from the ground. And there are people who may be doing creative things that are increasing their yields, increasing their production. Are we aware? We might be aware of the farmer who is doing the thing from 1900. Are we aware of the guy who is using the local technology and is doing something creative, something productive? Do we know? Is the ministry intimate with its clients in that way?
The ministry is intimate with its clients. And we have officers in the districts who would go out to the farmers and so on to assist them, depending on their needs. To be honest, we haven't had, we don't have information as to those who are creative and so on. And if we do, it's very little. And I'm glad that you brought up the point about the culture, because I mean, when you look at the entire scenario, what you find is that really and truly, how many parents or guardians are encouraging their children or their relatives to really go into agriculture. If you look at the statistics coming out of UAE of the people who are doing engineering, the people who are doing medicine, management, etc., you would see that, when you compare it, the statistics, it tells the story, all right? And that has been one of our major problems. Are we as a nation encouraging our people to go that route, even if it's a second job, right? And we have had discussions on that in the ministry, and in December I asked a group of my directors to really look at this thing, youth in agriculture, and see whether we could come up with some ways that we could make it seem, an area that they could really go into and love and whatever, even if it's a second job.
Okay. Ma'am, I can help you. I can give you an example.
Right.
There is an area in Muruga which is formerly known as La Fortune Trace, but which we call La Savane. It was state land allocated in the 1970s for agricultural output. So a lot of people moved into there and they started farming. Now recently, by accident, they created something called the scorpion pepper. By accident, it wasn't a planned thing. The bees, the insects, they did their thing. This scorpion pepper is created. It's the worst tasting pepper in the world, but it's tremendous. Actually, it has no taste, but it's tremendously powerful. And it is world-renowned. And they are willing to produce, and this can be branded, and it has a global name attached to it. It can be exported. It can earn foreign revenue. But these farmers have no water supply. They have no roads. The basic infrastructure that would help them to produce more, they lack. There are farmers in my constituency from Tableland. They produce, the best pineapple you can find. Mr. Mikala, you also know that. I went to visit them a few weeks ago. They are literally using one truck to pull another truck out of the mud with their produce because they can't get it out simply because they lack roads. They have no roads. And they've been clamoring for decades just for some yellow stone. And many of them every year lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in produce of a very high quality simply because they cannot get their produce out of the fields, much less the market. So whereas I'm asking about the scientific things and the larger things that will really qualitatively help us to produce more, there are some low-hanging fruit. Providing water, providing roads that could help to increase our output immediately. Because despite what we believe that the young people aren't involved in farming or don't care, there are maybe not sufficient, but there are a sizable number of people out there who are farming. And if we give them the basic infrastructure they need, we get a bump. And then we reach higher for the fruit that we have to stretch for. But the ones that are on the ground that we could grab and eat, we could start grabbing. And I'm sure that the other MPs here could say the same thing. Basic infrastructure on state lands that have been allocated for agriculture, the farmers can't get their produce out. I went into Tableland and literally you could lose a tractor in some of the holes in the roads. Where did my tractor go? It just went down in the road. Basic infrastructure. And we could help them, and they can and are willing to do the rest. So there are higher fruit that we have to aim for, getting that science inculcated into this agricultural culture. But if we do the low things, the road, first, we already bump production up. And I'm sure the other MPs here could attest to that as well. Areas that are very productive, but basic infrastructure missing, calamitous for the farmers.
I take your point.
If I may, Chair, just to augment what PS has said, questions you've asked about the question of productivity. Land tenure is a critical factor that has affected us over the years. If farmers don't have secure tenure, like in Yola Savannah, and I know the area, they cannot have the wherewithal to invest.
No, they can't.
And if they don't invest, they can't be innovative. They can't be productive and innovative. The issue is land tenure, and that's what we are trying to fix with the new commissioner there, and she's talking about expediting the issuance of leases. Because if you don't have tenure, you invest on land that is virtually not yours. So that tenure is one of the root causes of the lack of productivity and the hesitancy for innovation because you need money to do those things.
Agreed.
Other question of infrastructure that you raised, while it may seem simple to just put water on roads in those particular areas are very costly, and the ministry can only put in to those areas out of the allocations that it has gotten. Traditionally, over the years, the Ministry of Agriculture has not been allocated a lot of money for infrastructure support, and it's always a challenge. As the director of LWDD, which is the Land and Water, our engineering division can attest, we've always been struggling with money to put in roads. This year, I think we can only put in about 8 roads, Henry? About 8 roads, depending on the money you got. So that if we don't have money, we can't put in the infrastructure. If the farmers don't have tenure and they don't have infrastructure, those are some of the core reasons why, not to mention our small parcel sizes, in that we can't mechanize and we can't do some of the bigger things.
No,
All of that has to go into the mix.
Thank you.
The 50-year-old question.
And I appreciate, Ms. Farrell, your honesty, because if we're going to get any traction with agriculture, we can't pretend that these issues don't exist, because, all right, thank you. I'm happy.
Dr. Francis will take whatever steps he can to ensure that central government reviews your
We
allocation.
really hope so. We would be very happy.
That's why I stopped talking. Thank you for your honesty.
All right. In listening to the discourse between Dr. Francis and yourselves, and I'm picking up certain things in regards to the agricultural sector in relation to what he was talking about with culture and labor issues for farmers, land tenure, and availability of money. And one of the things I wanted to ask is that this has been going on, as he rightly indicated, for a number of years. My area of expertise is in the fisheries sector, and I'm just sitting here thinking if there's any kind of a program or initiative in Trinidad and Tobago to seek assistance or funding outside. So, for example, with the example he gave with this Moruga scorpion peppers being a valued commodity globally, is it not better to invite companies to come in and partner with the farmers? So the farmers themselves would become either directors or stakeholders in the very company that would be set up. So you have this strategic partnership between the two, and therefore that company outside will bring in the money for the roads and the water that they would need, and they would benefit by getting a product which is valuable to them that they can export outside. And then the farmers obviously benefit because they're able to grow here, and then they don't have to rely on a ministry that is contributing, I think, the least to GDP, and therefore works out to be a small amount of money that is gotten. And because you guys don't have the money, that company that is outside, be it international or otherwise, would be able to actually fund the development of that program. Is there any such thing or any kind of thought process in the ministry happening in that way? I'm talking specifically about strategic partnerships with international companies, because I could tell you point blank, in my experience, I have met with companies who have asked the question as to whether they can build farms in other countries because they are looking to protect their raw material. One such company, not that I have met with, but I know of, that does something like that is Lease, who would have farms and grow potatoes, because if they run out of potatoes, they don't get the chips. So it is beneficial to them to have farms of potatoes growing, and they would stockpile. We can have such a strategic partnership in Trinidad and Tobago to help develop the agricultural sector. There are many companies out there that would love to come in and develop agriculture here to protect their commodities. So is there anything, or is there any kind of thought process like that happening in the ministry right now?
If I may, if PS allows me, I've been in the ministry for a very long time, and I've seen things like that you've suggested. And we're not only going with international companies right here in Trinidad and Tobago. The question is the reliability of supply and the quality, consistency of quality. Lease is not going to come and partner with farmers who will give you, let's say, for your example, a scorpion pepper today, so much and whatever. National canners used to have contract farmers producing pigeon peas right on the highway there. The minute the price goes 1 or 2 cents higher on the fresh market, National Cannas is waiting for the farmer that he is contracted, and the farmer is ready to roadside selling the peas. The issue has to do with the cultural norms in Trinidad and Tobago, where we have not understood that if we have a contract to produce X amount at a certain quality, we have to do that. Farmers go in and out of agriculture. Part of it might have to do with their tenure status, but they are not consistent, so you're not going to get local companies doing that, far more international companies. And that has been my experience. I've seen it over the years, and I'm saying that, yes, the ideas are very good, but we have to have farmers who will reliably supply the quantities and quality that they contract to do. And even though they have a contract, they don't honor those contracts. We've tried pooling, we've had tractor pools, we've had all sorts of approaches within the ministry, and it has to do with a culture, every man to himself, basically.
And I understand that because in my area of expertise, the problems that you've just outlined also occur. What I was speaking specifically to is the farm being owned either predominantly by the international entity. Because when you do that, what would happen is that they are bringing their technology in and they are bringing their standards in. And the relationship you have with the farmer is that the farmer themselves are part owners of the company, be it a smaller percentage or whatnot. Because I think what you just described was a contract, as you rightly said, between the farmer and the international company, and those problems would occur. But if the farmer himself owns a piece of the company, then it is in his benefit to ensure that the company succeeds. And with the international company owning the majority share of that, they are going to ensure that it succeeds as well by bringing their technology in and their standards that they have from their culture to ensure that the product that is being grown is successful. So that is the type of arrangement I'm looking at, not so much that you're hiring farmers here to try and produce a particular quality, and as you rightly said, if the culture does not allow for that, then it's not going to work. So they're going to really have to come in with their technology and their standards, set that, and then the farmers, being part owners, would work towards ensuring that that quality is met and that the products could be exported and that everybody is benefiting.
Mr. Chairman, I want to say this morning that I've been listening to these discourses and a lot of doom and gloom. Apart from your minister being very dynamic, and you have expressed his dynamism, I'm not seeing the support mechanism in place to bring much of his plans into reality. For example, I asked a question earlier to this, and the Commissioner of State Land answered. And I asked specifically to tell me in districts what's going on with respect to farmers and land tenancy. The coordinator, you just spoke about land tenure and the issuance of leases and your challenges there. And you speak about farmers who are occupying lands not being able to access loans so that they could develop their farm in a capacity which could bring some kind of reduction in the food import bill. So therefore, you said, Commissioner of State Land, you said that no applications will be for you from the St. David's and Angela, which is an area I have been meeting with farmers who are very distraught, who are very dissatisfied, who are very unhappy because they have no leases, they have been on acreage for many years, and they don't seem to know what is the direction of the Ministry of Agriculture, what support mechanism you all have in place. I'm also looking at some of the answers that you all gave us here, where you specifically said that once per year you visit lands to determine if there are any breaches or if people are there occupying land illegally, and you put if staffing permits. So therefore, I'm looking at most of the issues here, and I'm also examining some of the things that you all hope to achieve. And I will quote. You all hope to contribute more significantly to rural development, sustained livelihood, improved standard of living, increased employment, increased incomes and wealth creation. And more specifically, the Minister of Agriculture seeks to reduce the food import bill. I want to ask a question to the Director of Human Resource. What changes have you engaged to make some of these things become a reality? Because the Commissioner of State Lands has said directly to us that she has no staff. So we know now that, I mean, you seem to provide us with a position of doom and gloom. I don't want to believe that. I want to have hope. So I want to hear from the Human Resource Director, what changes are you looking at in the ministry to achieve some of these goals that you have outlined here? Because certainly you all have identified certain shortcomings and within the ministry itself, but tell us something, what you are doing. And I want you, when the Commissioner of State Land told me nothing for St. David's and Andrew, I really was disturbed at that, because I hear farmers with their plights, and tell us what you plan to do within this coming year that could alleviate some of these problems and achieve some of your objectives that you have outlined to us today.
Hi, good morning, everyone. First, let me say we have appointed the Commissioner of State Land, a very dynamic woman. And what the HR unit right now we are doing, we have advertised and interviewed, and we are seeking to fill the positions within her unit. They're on the front burner, because if we have the staff that can go out there, right now we have 3 land enforcement officers, 2 positions we have filled. We have on board, we're going to bring on an enforcement unit manager. We're going to bring on land enforcement officers, 20 of them. And we're going to bring on also a support, which is business operations coordinators. With the staff on board, these people will be able to go out there and look at the what is happening within our communities, within the country, to bring elevation to the problems that we are being experienced by our farmers. What we plan to do as a ministry is really staff the land enforcement, the land division, with the staffing that they need, that they'll be able to carry the function. Currently, it's just staffed by OJTs and daily paid officers who really cannot. So we're trying to get the establishment for the land in order. We have a note before the PMCD right now, just waiting the comments of the Minister of Public Administration. We take into Cabinet to create 36 more contract positions. We are looking at we are going to get some positions transferred to the ministry. That is 1, 2, and 6, 8, and 10, 18, 19. Positions like GIS technicians, graphic data entry clerks, junior land officers. These positions will be on contract, but all these positions on board, the land management division will really be able to carry out its mandate to really serve the farmers. If that answers the question.
In addition, Chair, we've been working closely with the Service Commissions Department, because we have at the top level of the land management division positions like the Assistant Commissioner of State Lands, the Deputy Commissioner, which they are attending to, and we're hoping that they will do the interviews in not too distant future. Apart from which, the Service Commissions had indicated to us that they have been giving our ministry priority in terms of filling the positions. Our areas generally is a specialized area where you need an agriculture degree. And as I told you before, we have been having a little difficulty in getting such persons. Apart from that, we're about to meet with the Faculty of Agriculture, right, to see what we could, if we could get some people out there who would be willing to come and work in the public service, right? Also to meet with the Chief Personnel Officer, because we have some minor problems with the job description, because some of the positions call for a degree that no longer exists in UB. And we have to get that changed or probably something appended to it so that we would be able to get the people on board. So those are some of the areas in terms of staffing that we're looking at. Also, the Human Resource Management Unit, you forgot to say, Ms. Berkeley's. We'll be meeting with each division, right, to determine the needs. What we have is an aging population in the ministry, and as you would imagine, the institutional memory would be, the institutional knowledge would be leaving us. In some instances, we've have brought on board people who have worked for a long time in the ministry, so that others could learn from them, and also to keep to know what the history is and how things came about and that kind of thing. So we're trying to do it in a structured and scientific way, right, so that we will get the best benefit out of doing it.
Last thing, because you realize I'm interested in regularization of farmers on state land. Are you all using the facility of the GPS technique to speed up the application process, where you have to look at the...
If I may answer, GPS can't help you speed up the application process. The GPS would allow you to just locate where farmers are. While the commissioner may not have any leases for St. Andrews and David in front of her, there are many that are in process. What we have restarted within the last year since I'm back in the ministry is a systematic assessment in the field of all those blocks of land that are in all of the counties. This is where the county offices come in. And as we get in blocks, we would go through, and we have to go to cabinet. First of all, the farmers have to meet the basic criteria of having some level of cultivation, which is around 75%, because you have to show some intent that you are in fact farming and not just blocking land. A lot of people do that. They occupy land and they're not really farming for whatever reasons, so that a lot are in process. A lot of blocks from St. Andrews and David in particular, where is your area of interest, are in the process of being analyzed, and the field work has been done. Significant amount of field work has been done over the last year. And those persons we would do a note to cabinet, and once cabinet approves, cabinet has to approve first. Once cabinet approves, then it goes to the commissioner for execution of release, preparation of release documents. We have to offer the persons the land, they have to accept the offer, and then the leases are executed. So while the commissioner might not have any to execute in front of her now, there's a lot that is in process for all of the counties, not only St. Andrews and David.
Sometimes an excuse given is the process of surveying the land. What process are you utilizing for surveying land before the regularization?
Cabinet has mandated that before, what used to happen was that the ministry used to survey lands, which was lengthening the process, because the ministry had to have funds to survey. Now, once you get approval for your regularization for the grant of a standard agricultural lease, and the commissioner writes the prospective tenant, the tenant is advised to hire your own surveyor and get your survey done. That speeds up the process, because in any event, the lease execution fees would include some aspect of the survey fund, the survey fee. So it is faster, rather than waiting on the government to survey, that the prospective tenant gets his own surveyor. The commissioner would provide them with a list of licensed surveyors, because surveyors have to re-register every year. And you're advised to go to your survey, and once they come in with survey plans, then she could execute the leases. So that the fact that she doesn't have any in front of her is because all of those things are in process right now.
Thank you.
Madam PS, how strong is the relationship between the Ministry of Agriculture and the Faculty of Agriculture at UA?
Well, we have not established a relationship as yet. As I told you, we are going to approach them. We have officers within the ministry in different areas that would liaise with them from time to time. But in terms of, you're speaking about the term, about what I said about the staffing, right?
Any term.
Any term.
Technology, education, any area.
We have some officers that would liaise with them from time to time. Those who deal with cocoa, coconuts, animal production, that kind of thing. Yeah, I can't get all off the top of my head right now.
That strikes me
But-
as being tremendously strange.
No, well,
That relationship is not lockstep. For example, there's a school of education at UE that necessarily the Ministry of Education must work very closely with for a number of reasons. I'm thinking, I don't see how the Ministry of Agriculture can do anything fundamental in terms of improving agriculture without having that dyad with the Faculty of Agriculture.
there's a relationship in some areas, not all areas, I would say.
Do you think it should be more what I'm describing?
It should be. Yes, it should be, and probably I'm not doing justice to this because I'm new.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, to answer your question, I would say yes, there are some instances because I know there is some collaboration, right, with UE, right, and I believe that there should be a stronger relationship, right. Since my tenure, that is one of the things that I have on the table for me to engage in.
Because I'm asking, what if the crop varieties that we are using now in Trinidad are simply not productive enough, and we need higher yielding varieties? Where is that technology going to come from? I am thinking Faculty of Agriculture has to be one of the obvious sources.
Well, that is one of the areas, but we also get assistance from the FAO, international agencies, depending on what. We also have assistance from ICA as well.
Madam
and-
PS, sometimes the solutions can be found locally.
Yes,
Sorry to interrupt, but one of the great tragedies that we've suffered in this country, unknown to us, is that when Tate and Lyle left and went back to England in the 1970s, they took all of the documentation in terms of the experiments that they conducted at Centennial for decades with them. So whereas we gained the land, we lost a lot of the technology that would have been created here. And to some extent, I mean, we wonder what could have been had that not been the case. But there is a tremendous role to be played by UE in terms of giving us some of that technology, some of that know-how that is clearly lacking throughout the nation.
And I agree with you. And as I said, we have people who collaborate, divisions that collaborate with them. But one of the fundamental things we have to take into consideration as well, and why we engage international organizations, is that they assist us with funding, right? Some of the different technologies and so on, they're willing, through grants and so on, to assist us with it, and that is why generally you would find that we go on board with international agencies.
Careful what you could see to Madam Pierce. The General Manager of PTSC last appeared here.
Thank you. I know where Chairman is going. The last couple questions to the General Manager of PTSC, he ended up on the wrong end of the stick. So, just fair warning. Madam PS, I want to deviate a bit from the line of questioning that has been put forward so far. And I'm hearing all the challenges, and I agree because it's not new to anybody sitting here, and the same challenges that we've been hearing over the years. Now, the United Nations have found a formula to fix some of these issues More so, you made the point that when you have administration changes and you have the upheavals inside the ministries, by the time you get a chance to breathe, 3/4 of the term has already gone and you're preparing for an exchange right after. Now, Trinidad and Tobago have signed a very small agreement in the United Nations called the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal. And the objective of the United Nations was that if signatories were to take these 17 goals, plus the 135 executing items, and generate policy, it means that changes of administration, changes of technical officers, directorship, doesn't impact because we have committed to be at a certain place in 2030 based on this SDG. And with specific reference to your ministry, SDG number 2, which basically talks about ending hunger, achieving food security, improved nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture, they have about 8 bullet points that they asked us in developing countries like Trinidad and Tobago to create your policies around that. Now, my question is, have there been any consideration over the last couple of years since Trinidad and Tobago would have signed on to that agreement to harmonize our policies in the Ministry of Agriculture to speak to any of those objectives as outlined in the Sustainable Development Goal Index?
Well, actually, our new National Agricultural Sector, well, the draft National Agricultural Sector Plan has taken that into consideration. Some of our PSIP projects taken that into consideration. Oh, sorry, you all didn't hear me?
We're hearing you.
Okay. Yeah. And particularly with the agricultural sector plan, we have paid attention to the 2030 goals. So it's a work in progress, and I have been asking my leaders in the ministry that when they are preparing projects and so on, that they should have that in mind. I'm trying to get them, to link, the projects to these goals and so on.
I just want to follow up on a point that MP Francis made in terms of our ability really to manage mega farms and whether we have the labor, whether we have the capital resources. And one specific item under that Sustainable Development Goal, and if you'd allow me just to read it at 2.3, by 2030, we must double the agricultural productivity and the incomes of small-scale food producers, particularly women, indigenous people, family farmers, pastoralists, and fishers, including through secure and equal access to land and other productive resources, and the inputs, knowledge, financial services, markets, and opportunities for the value addition and non-farm employment. Now, taking those things into consideration, when you take those bullet items, if we as ministry, and not only the agricultural ministry, because I visited Mexico at the 13th plenary session in December, and I listened to parliaments from across the regions as to what they were doing in terms of accomplishing this 2030 objective. And I can tell you, ma'am, that those parliaments, those legislative arms of government, they are well ahead of the game in terms of timing their policies to speak to these items. Now, the question that I want to ask, a minister, not our particular minister in agriculture, but a minister is a policy director. And I suspect the people in the ministries are the technical experts in the area. What is the role, what is the relationship between the policy formation? Does it just come down from the legislative arm, from the state to you, or is there a bi-directional compromise in terms of you being the technical experts in the area? Do you really have an opportunity to say, well, a minister, look, we need to follow this, and these are areas that we feel you must take back to the government in terms of formulating policy. Is that an interaction that happens?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Has anything been done in terms of this particular SDG in terms of policy framework for 2016, 2017?
Well, with regard to the fisheries aspect, you would know that we have constructed a number of fish landing sites, which would assist the fishermen in coming to sell their produce and so on. Right, those are things to come on stream. We have construction of about 7 or 8 landing sites. We have engaged UDCOT to construct one in the Carenage area. So the fishing villages, we more or less have that. Fisheries. You said women, fish.
Women, fisheries, you have small families, small-scale farming. How do we engage those families in
small-scale farming? We have our extension officers going out to these farmers and assisting them with technical things, trying to engage them in new ways of doing things and so on. We've had one of our county officers go to El Salvador and actually visit the family farming units, see what they do there, and how they manage to to engage the people in El Salvador to continue into the farming. And that person has been going out and relaying the experience and so on. What else?
Let me just ask one last component of this question on the SDGs. And I know one of the cry earlier on was funding, in that the ministry gets the smallest piece of the pie, and right now you're expected to deliver the Hail Mary at the end of the day. Selling the concept of the SDG, taking note of the fact that agriculture not only deals with food, but when you deliver the service line, you're talking about poverty eradication, you're talking about pollution, you're talking about environmental impact, you're talking about families, you're talking about building stronger family units when you put families to work. Is there an opportunity, perhaps in the 2017-2018 budget, for you as the technical officers in the ministry to enforce with the government of the day that we need more than 0.2% of the national budget, based on the fact that you and your ministry are impacting so much more than just food and food production? Because unless we can get more money in this ministry, we will come here next year and we will go through the same process over and over again. Is that something that you're willing to challenge? And don't lose your job either.
Oh gosh. Well, actually, I'm having a meeting with my directors next week, and this is one of the areas up for discussion, because as you know, we would have to present projects in the new year. So we're thinking ahead of what we want to engage in, but we really want to, well, I am thinking, I have to put it out to them, that we engage in broad themes, so like youth in agriculture in rural areas.
PS, there are 8 foundation points under the SDG. You go through those 8 points, you'll get 200 projects, theme projects, to execute on that. And it'll be very, very interesting to see the type of drives and themes you can do in your ministry by just looking at those 8 foundation items. So,
Yeah, so
you get time to take a look at
we're
it.
going to come up with those themes, and of course, with that, we would have to ask for funding, right? So that would be the role, that would be the part that we would play with regard to that, right? And we intend to convince enough so that we would get the funding.
I just want to remind our viewing and listening audience that we are monitoring the questions from YouTube and Twitter and other medium, and that before this broadcast is finished, we would pose the questions to the officials from the Ministry of Agriculture. It would be remiss of me, myself as a former public servant in the Ministry of Local Government, if I didn't note that the Commissioner of State Lands referred to the county of St. Patrick, and I was almost tempted to interrupt at that level and ask, but where is that? Because as far as I'm aware, the Municipal Corporations Act abolished these divisions. There is no such thing as the county of St. Patrick, Victoria, Caroni, etc., etc. But yet I keep, when I'm traversing the country, I keep meeting these signposts outside ministries, says Ministry of Works, St. Patrick Division, Victoria East and West. Good? And there are no such places on the official maps of Trinidad and Tobago. I thought I should mention that in passing so that the PS would be guided that there is need for interagency, interministerial collaboration on the question, because we are coming almost to repeal or amend substantially the Municipal Corporations Act at this juncture of our history. It being Act 21 of 1990, but so this is 26 years later, and apparently that collaboration between the ministries to effectively abolish the county system has not run its full course. So I thought I should mention that in passing. What I wanted to draw attention to, and it has come out to some degree, the need for interagency collaboration, especially with regard to the lands formerly Caroni, now AMBD, I think, and the lands formerly of British Petroleum, Apex, Trinidad Petroleum Development, Texaco, Shell, now Petrotrin, and now under the auspices of Palaseco Agricultural Enterprises Limited, commonly known as PSAEL. To what extent is collaboration taking place with these new institutions? Because in effect, they are the largest landholder in Trinidad and Tobago. And much of the land in their jurisdiction is agricultural land. I mean, they, especially with PSAL, there are huge tracts of land across the south that are under their jurisdiction, much the same as with, AMBD, the former Caroni lands. And is there a dynamic ongoing process where the ministry is engaging them to ensure that the lands under their purview are brought into active agricultural production?
Chair, if I may just comment on the first part of your comment about counties being no longer relevant. We are very much aware of the Act of 1990, but that Act of 1990 spoke only to how regional corporations are to be elected and what their duties are to be in terms of managing the regions under their purview, the abattoirs, the roads, the cemeteries, etc. In 1927, which we still use, all our lands were divided, and we call them divisions, into wards and counties. And the two main forms of tenure of lands, still in terms of registration in Trinidad and Tobago, whether under the Real Property Act or under the Registration of Deeds, speaks specifically towards. Those votes have never been abolished in terms of land registration. So the Act of 1990 did not speak to land registration, and we continue on with the 1927 divisions of wards and counties.
I'm aware of that. I was just putting it on the table because as public servants, it would fall to you to notify the changing administrations of the incomplete business of the parliaments, in the sense that when we went from the imperial system to the metric system, it would fall to public servants to point out to the central government, listen, there are certain things you need to do, so that we've got to change the milestones to kilometer stones. So within the context of our budget, we make submissions to have that effected. And therefore it would, within the context of the various ministries, saying to the central government, look, listen, we have this absurdity. We are referring to things that are not on the map. So if I'm driving through the country, where is this St. Patrick? The only place I'm going to see it is outside some ministry saying that this is the division of St. Patrick East or West. So that I was raising that question within that context. It would fall to the public servant to alert changing administrations, because it was the Nara administration that brought that act to Parliament. And they went out of office some 4 or 5 years later. So it would fall to the public servant to alert successive administrations as to the incomplete business of that parliamentary agenda and its consequences. So in that context, I raise it. I didn't mean to tell you that you're not doing your job, but in a sense, yes, it falls on public servant to alert administrations to all incomplete projects, and that would have been an incomplete project. It still is. The other thing I wanted to draw some attention, there's the other question as to interagency collaboration, EMBD, PACL. Can I get a response on that?
While, yes, other agencies have over time been allocated the administration of various sectors of state land, we have HDC, we have LSA, we have lots of different state agencies that are, say, managing or controlling state land. In most cases, okay, I wouldn't say most, but in quite a few cases, it is via a head lease that was given from the Commissioner of State Lands. In other cases, like PSEL, they would have, through different acts and activities, they would be now managing lands, yes, what we call the oil lands, but they manage to a certain extent, probably the surface rights, but then the subsurface rights still belong to the state, of which the Commissioner of State Lands then gets involved. So in terms of collaboration, we try to meet, if there are issues on a particular block of land and I recognize, okay, I need to speak with PSEL or I need to speak with HDC or LSA, as Commissioner, we speak and we collaborate and we come up with a decision. Within the ministry, I know EMBD is assigned to this ministry, and there is ongoing discourse with EMBD and also with Carney 1975 Limited.
I would hope that there was a much more systemic approach, in the sense that there are vast tracts of land, of arable, land, as opposed to some of the lands out at Tableland and so on, and Moruga, which are, questionable as to their fertility. If you look at the lands between Faizabad, Sapari, and Point Fortin, where some of the biggest oil company holdings are, these are much more, fertile parcels. So, one would be hoping that there is an ongoing program to have these lands brought more creatively into food production. The other thing I wanted to get some feedback on is what has happened to youth camps, and what is the ministry's position on that approach to broadening our food production horizons?
That particular area is an area that needs review. And that is why I was saying earlier on that we have a committee looking at that. They have submitted a report, but I haven't had a chance to look at it as yet. So there's going to be some discussion in our meeting next week with regard to that. So.
Okay, so I would allow you, to make a further submission when you all have had a chance to review that.
Yeah.
The other issue I wanted to raise, I think it came up in Dr. Lovell's question, the whole question of collaboration with UE and UTT and any other educational institution, certainly tertiary institutions, on the whole question of how are we to generate future farming community. Are you all, for instance, in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, and what, in your view, should be in the educational curriculum so as to create the possible scenarios of people growing up wanting to be a farmer? In other words, do we have the way they have with universities, where they have these college fairs, or in the Chamber of Commerce and them have these employment fairs, where you are focusing on the possible schools you can go to or the possible jobs that exist, given any sector or industry? Is any kind of approach of that nature being pursued so that we can know where the next generation of farmers would come from?
I know that in the past we had this school gardening competition. So that is one area that we were engaged in, as well as the 4-H clubs, right? That's the second area, and there was a third. IAPA, right? That is a youth apprenticeship program we engaged in as well.
What kind of numbers are involved in that?
Yeah, IAPA. Excuse me, sorry.
What kind of numbers are involved in those programs?
I don't have the numbers offhand. I would have to get that to you. I don't have the numbers offhand.
But do you feel that the numbers are significant, that they will impact on the society?
My personal view, no. My personal view. With regard to college fairs and so, from time to time, we have schools asking us to send representatives, to relay to students, what is involved in the different types of jobs that we have in the ministry, as well what being a farmer entails, and so on. But it's at their request. With regard to UTT and UE, UTT, we've used the services of UTT with regard to livestock, and we engaged a consultant in the last quarter to look at small ruminants, small ruminant production in Trinidad and Tobago, and that person worked alongside persons in the UTT. That program, that that consultancy is about to start again. This time looking, giving an overview or reviewing our farms, our livestock farms, to see, what is the best recommendation for us to move forward with that.
The other issue that has come up from time to time is the question of the labor supply at existing farms or prospective farms for that matter. Given that at the lowest level in terms of the remuneration paid for workers, you have the CPEP URP, I think it's $75 a day. And the average rate for a laborer in industry or anywhere else around the country is somewhere between $200 and $350 a day. How does the ministry propose to affect the availability of labor to farmers, and whether there's any consideration of CPEP/URP being utilized in this manner?
There is a consideration of utilizing CPEP, as the Prime Minister had announced after the retreat earlier this month. At present, we are working on it to see, how we would bring it on stream. With regard to the remuneration, that is something that we have to carefully look at, because there are instances where we have the daily pays working alongside other laborers, and that has brought some contention. So we are aware that that can be an impact on whether we get people to come to work at these farms.
But you would concede that the training initiatives that were supposed to be involved in CPEP would lend themselves to adoption within a farming environment?
Yes. But we still have to be mindful. We still have to be mindful of the daily paid element. We have a lot of daily pays in our ministry, and from time to time, like on some of the farms, we have a couple of them, as I said before, working alongside people who are getting a lower salary than they do.
I want to compliment Madam PS for the answers you have provided us so far, and I want to stick also with a point that you recognize. You recognize in agriculture you have two populations, an aging population and a youth population. And I want to give you the opportunity now to highlight some of the distinct strategies you intend to adopt going forward in this fiscal year.
Is this question in relation to the youth and aging population, or generally?
It is related to the agriculture population that you have recognized on holdings, where you have the aging population not wanting to embrace technology, and how do you attract the youth population into the agriculture field?
All right. As I said earlier on, it is something that we are looking at now. So I don't have a full answer for you, but I also want to let you know that at some of our farms, we've had an apprenticeship program where we have young people up to the age of 35, I believe, who have come to the farms, and we have people who teach them how to to plant different products and plants and so on. Also, we have the incentives for youth. They can get up to $30,000, I believe it is, in incentives. It's for them to start to start their business and so on. We also have extension training for those who are so inclined, to give them some knowledge and so on, and also to encourage them to stay in it. So thus far, those are the kinds of things we have been engaged in so far.
We'll now take the questions we're receiving from YouTube and over the phone. First question we got was, does the Lands and Surveys Division / mapping section fall within the purview of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries? That was the first question.
Yes, it does.
Does the Lands and Surveys Division mapping section fall within the purview of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries?
Okay, so it's lands and survey and mapping. Survey and mapping is under lands and survey.
If I may, it's the Land Management Division of the Ministry of Agriculture and the Surveys and Mapping Division of the Ministry of Agriculture, and we have the Commissioner of State Lands who heads the Land Management Division and the Director of Surveys who heads the Surveys and Mapping Division.
And they're all part of the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
The second question we got was, when last has the ministry sanctioned the upgrade of its topographical maps?
In 2014, we did aerial photography throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and now the information is available. Updated maps are available for Trinidad and Tobago. From those aerial photography, we are able to generate topographical maps for the entire country, for entire Trinidad and Tobago. So they are available at present.
Third question, Trinidad and Tobago is noted to be over 5,000 square kilometers. Trinidad and Tobago is noted to be over 5,000 square kilometers. How much of that are state lands versus private lands?
At this point in time, state lands, and if we include forest reserves, which is our biggest subsector of state lands, state lands are just about 51%, 52% of the entire acreage of Trinidad and Tobago.
The question we got over the phone, what is the process for reclassification of land, particularly since there are many cases where land is developed and infrastructure put in, but the classification is not changed from agricultural to residential?
That is a matter. The classification of land falls under the portfolio of Town and Country Planning Division, which is a part of the Ministry of Planning and Development.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, Chair, when areas are to be reclassified, for example, from agriculture to residential or commercial, the ministry makes an approach to the Town and Country Planning Division for that area to be reclassified.
Before we close, Madam PS, are there any parting comments you would like to make?
I have to repeat. Yes. It has been a learning experience, this particular forum. I've noted some of the points and the line of questioning where you all are going to, so that we could look at that. It has been a pleasure being here, despite, the questioning, the hard question, even a 50-year-old question. And I want to wish you all the best in your future endeavors as you try, to assist us and also to understand all matters pertaining to state lands.
Thank you very much, Madam Pierce, and extend, our thanks to your staff for the honesty and the candor with which you all have responded, and the timeliness of your responses generally. And we look forward to any additional submissions which you may wish to make, given, the line of questioning this morning. And I want to say thanks to fellow members of my committee for their assistance in these deliberations. And I should have announced earlier that Mr. Nigel De Freitas is the Vice President of the Senate. So for the viewing public, he has left us for another engagement. But our listenership and our viewing audience should know that we had, as a new member of this committee, the Vice President of the Senate, Mr. Nigel De Freitas. Again, I wish to thank the viewing public for their attention, and of course, to those present, including the PS and her staff, for ably assisting the deliberations of this committee. Thank you. Have a pleasant day. The meeting now stands adjourned.